So basically, what's happening here is that the liberals who can't quit the lockdown. So there's a bunch of liberals, progressive, left wingers, whom even as the CDC and different public civil servants like Dr. Fauci and that other representative who I just showed earlier, I forget her name, but even though they have said that, like, hey, we are turning a corner and that it is safe to now start engaging in different activities and whatnot, opening some of the schools and businesses and shit, there are plenty of left wingers and progressives whom were very good at the issue just not too long ago, but now have become way too bearish, way too averse to actually getting out there. And now there's actually, and the thing is that what's going to fucked up that's going to happen is that this is actually going to help justify some of the concerns, the unbased concerns that right wingers and skeptics have. So let's look at this real quick. Let me go ahead and zoom. Lurking among the jubilant Americans venturing back out to bars and planning their summer wedding travel is a different group, liberals who aren't quite ready to let go of pandemic restrictions. For this subset, diligence against COVID 19 remains an expression of political identity, even when that means overestimating the disease's risks or setting limits far more strict than what the public health guidelines permit. In surveys, Democrats express more worry about the pandemic than Republicans do, not surprising. Republicans and right wingers, especially conservative religious males, white males, are actually the ones that are saying that they're holding out the most on getting the vaccine. They don't want to get the vaccine, and that they're COVID skeptics, COVID deniers, masks skeptics, and all that good jazz. People who describe themselves as very liberal are distinctly anxious. This spring, after the vaccine rollout had started, a third of very liberal people were very concerned about becoming seriously ill from COVID 19, from good reason, compared with a quarter of both liberals and moderates, according to a study conducted by the University of North Carolina political scientist Mark Hetherington. And 43% of very liberal respondents believed that getting the coronavirus would have a very bad effect on their life, compared with a third of liberals and moderates. Last year, when the pandemic was raging, scientists and public health officials were still trying to understand how the virus spread. Extreme care was warranted. People all over the country made enormous sacrifices, rescheduling weddings, missing funerals, canceling graduations, avoiding family members they loved to protect others. Some conservatives refused to wear masks or stay home because of skepticism about the severity of the disease or a refusal to give up their freedoms. But this is a different story about progressives who stressed the scientific evidence and then veered from it. Okay, so this actually is the one that I was looking for. I thought it was a New York Times one. For many progressives, extreme vigilance was in part about opposing Donald Trump. And very true. Some people, all it took for them to latch on this was to be anti-Trump. Doesn't mean that science wasn't playing an actual role, but that's sometimes to put people really over the edge and make them really activate them to playing the game is that, like, well, no, if Trump is out here or if this figure is going to end up promoting this idea, then I have to take up space because I know how much space they occupy. There was one thing I wanted to mention. Well, no, they're just talking about, yeah, never mind. Anyway, it could also be knee jerk. If he said, keep schools open, then, well, we're going to do everything in our power to keep schools closed. Monica Gandhi, a professor of medicine at UC San Francisco, told me. Gandhi describes herself as left of left. So this is a self-acclaimed lefty woman, but has alienated some of her ideological peers because she advocated for policies such as reopening schools and having a clear or establishing a clear timeline for the end of mask mandates. We went the other way in an extreme way against Trump's politicization, Gandhi said. Geography and personality may have also contributed to progressives' caution. Some of the most liberal parts of the country are places where the pandemic hit especially hard, and Hetherington found that very liberal participants in his survey tended to be the most neurotic. Oh, that was actually the thing I did want to bring up, was that they mentioned anxiousness, right? And neuroticism is that those are traits that are considered to be usually these are traits that are considered to be more present in conservatives. That they're much more anxious about being replaced in society. They're much more neurotic about the concerns of or I guess that, I don't know. I think maybe that's different than just having a sense of fear. I think anxiousness and neuroticism is more about thinking about things that are outside your control, or sometimes even things within your control. think about missed opportunities, whereas the right wing fear is more, it's just based out of bigotry, fears about replacement and shit like that. They're not exactly the same. But the point I'm trying to get to is I like the way that they're bringing those two things up, the neuroticism, the anxiousness, because around these issues, when people who care about this stuff and know that there are things we can do to prevent it, saying just bringing out that side of us when we know we have to engage with so many people who don't give a fuck and all the different rationalities that they come up to justify it. And again, I'm somebody who is considered, saying pretty left wing. The spring of 2021 is different from the spring of 2020, though. Scientists know a lot more about how COVID 19 spreads and how it doesn't. Public health advice is shifting, but some progressives have not updated their behavior based on the new information because there is definitely plenty of space for people to fall into line with progressivism and left wingism or liberalism as a knee-jerk reaction or from their their own kind of brainwashing. Yeah, they may come away with more better things like an appreciation for democracy or for multiculturalism or for dissenting opinions and multi-party factions and stuff like that, and those are good things. They can still be turned on their head and to put to negative, very negative ends, even if it may not be as equally destructive as those whom don't embrace any of those ideals at all. And in their eagerness to protect themselves and others, they may be underestimating other costs. There's always a trade-off. There's always a trade-off. These are some of the people who are like, they never want the fucking pandemic to end. You know what I'm saying? Whether it's their chance to be authoritarian and make people do what they want them to do, or if it's just bringing out, again, that more neurotic, anxious side in them, that's maybe already a characteristic of people who tend to identify politically like that, because then you tend to put a lot of emotional energy into certain issues more so than others and in a specific way. Or if it's just people who were super antisocial and are grateful that they didn't have to engage with society, to whatever degree that means. But those are some of the other costs. Those are some of the trade-offs. Being extra careful about COVID-19 is mostly harmless when it's limited to wiping down your groceries with Lysol wipes and wearing a mask in places where you're unlikely to spread the coronavirus, such as on a hiking trail. But vigilance can have unintended consequences when it imposes on other people's lives. Even as scientific knowledge of COVID-19 has increased, some progressives have continued to embrace policies and behaviors that aren't supported by evidence, such as banning access to playground, closing beaches, and refusing to reopen schools for in-person learning. Those who are vaccinated on the left seem to think overcaution is now the way to go, which is making people on the right question the effectiveness of the vaccines, Gandhi told me. Public figures and policymakers who try to dictate others' behavior without any scientific justification for doing so erode trust in public health and make people less willing to take useful precautions. The marginal gains of staying shut down might not justify the potential backlash. Exactly. This is perfect. Like I was saying before, is that even though I'm somebody who is more so on the cautious side, I've been back at work. I've definitely hung out with people on different occasions before I had any dosage of the vaccine, and what I'm saying, and engaged in other activities. I've had my moments of weakness or breaking away from that. For the most part, I try to stick with it, but it's because I ultimately knew that I'm going to get back into these behaviors. I'm going to get back outside and doing these things, and I just want to take the necessary precautions. But that I understand that we shut everything down so that we can open things back up, right, and not have the same issues we're dealing with. But these people, whatever their hangups are, they refuse to let it go. You know what I'm saying? And then I'll read a couple more parts of this. I don't know exactly how long this thing is, but not that long, but I'm not going to read the whole thing. Even as the very effective COVID-19 vaccines have become widely accessible, shout out Moderna gang, baby, 10 days, and I'm good to go for 6 months. And then all I need is some booster packs from then. Many progressives continue to listen to voices preaching caution over relaxation. Anthony Fauci recently said he wouldn't travel or eat at restaurants even though he's fully vaccinated, despite CDC guidance that these activities can be safe for vaccinated people who take precautions. California Governor Gavin Newsom refused in April to take the to guarantee that the state schools will fully reopen in the fall, even though studies have demonstrated for months that modified in-person instruction is safe. I don't know, and the thing is, I don't know what they mean by like the modified in-person instruction. I've seen those clips of like every damn desk having a partition of plastic around it, and one of the teachers, she even demonstrated by sitting behind it, is being like, you can't see shit, it's obstructing the way your ability to hear, and then kids have their masks on, so it's harder for you to hear them. They have to pull the mask down to try to talk to you. Um, you know what I'm saying? So, see, that's the problem, is that it's too easy to like ask all these questions and all these qualifiers and be like, okay, but what does this really mean? And you know what I'm saying? Should we err on the side of caution because there's a lot of inadequate, a lot of inconsistent information, a lot of shit that we're still finding out. Oh my God! At a certain point, I think it really just kind of comes down to preference. At a certain point, that whether you take the science and shit behind it seriously or not, if you're somebody that has a preference for going outside, being sociable, and having those random encounters and whatnot, you're still going to engage in those things, just to different degrees. And that both, and that coming from that same place, both can find shortcomings with some of these explanations. But especially left wing people who really take into consideration critical thinking and shit like that, and scientific authority. Leaders in Brookline, Massachusetts decided this week to keep a local outdoor mask mandate in place, even though the CDC recently relaxed its guidance for outdoor mask use. I don't know, like I said, I'm probably going to be wearing a mask for a little while. And scolding is still a popular pastime. Yeah, the cancel culture shit. Which a lot of people like to say that cancel culture is only something that exists online or for rich prominent figures. That's not the case. People are getting their lives turned upside down at many different levels and being called out for not just bigoted behavior, but just having certain outbursts. Saying because we've come to use that as a weapon, and say that, hey, this person representing your company in a really bad way, or they're associated with you in this way. You have to make a statement or dissociate yourself. At least in San Francisco, a lot of people are glaring at each other if they don't wear masks outside, Gandhi said, even though the risk of outdoor transmission is very low. After Emily Oster, an economist at Brown University, argued in The Atlantic in March that families should take their kids on trips and see families and relatives this summer, a reader sent in one fucking reader sent in an email, to her supervisors at the university, suggesting that Oster be promoted to a leadership role in the field of genocide encouragement. Oh my God. Far too many people are not dying in our current global pandemic, and far too many children are not yet infected, the reader wrote. With the upcoming consequences of global warming about to be felt by a wholly unprepared worldwide community, I believe the time is right to get young scholars ready to follow the Dr. Oster's footsteps and ensure the most comfortable place is to be white and upper middle class. That email was something else, Oster told me. Oh God, okay, and this is the other thing that I really don't like about it, is how identity politics has become so weaponized. And I don't just mean by bad faith actors or goofy ass white people or liberals and shit. I'm also talking about black and people of color and a lot of the people who have, who like to claim, well, we came up with this. No, certain academics or certain activists came up with these fucking terms, or certain people in the media came up with these phrases and terms, and that just became something that y'all piggybacked on. A lot of people have used white as this pejorative in itself, as if there's original sin attached to being white, or that is their original sin to being upper middle class and whatnot. Even though there are plenty of moments in time when you need certain people like this to be effectively traitors to their quote-unquote race or ethnicity or to their class in order to bring about results, because the people who are coming from lower status or marginalized groups, even when they come all together, can oftentimes not have the same impact that a handful of people can have from the inside. You know what I'm saying? But again, the invocation that like whiteness means the same thing that it means from a very U.S. centric point of view, when that's simply not the case. I hate this shit, and this is absolutely the result of this. I don't know the ethnicity of these people. I'm going to guess that the doctor named Gandhi is probably of South Asian heritage. Dr. Oster, I don't know what they are. They could be anything. But to just say that this is like a genocide encouragement, and that to ensure the most comfortable place to be is white and upper middle class. um Jesus Christ. No, they're some of the best places who've dealt with the coronavirus, like New Zealand, Australia. Yeah, these are very white centric places, but they also are multicultural, multi ethnic places. And then also you have examples of like South Korea. You have Japan. You have different African countries. You have certain Latin countries who've been doing really good. Cuba has been doing a good job with this, and what I'm saying, you can't just say, oh, white upper middle class, even though I'm sure you can, even though of course there will be divisions along those lines. Those examples, there's plenty of examples that cut against this, but it's just the weaponization, the propagation that is propagandizing that has gone on in left wing and progressive circles, in which white is calling somebody white is an insult in and of itself, and something that is seen as an actual own, or that's because somebody is rich that they are automatically like an inverse hierarchy. Because somebody's of a higher social status in those means, they automatically have less of a personality, or they're automatically less they have less integrity, you know what I'm saying, than poor or middle class working people. I fucking hate this shit, and we're definitely gonna be calling this shit out more and more and more. Um, yeah, and there's different, people giving their opinions on this shit. Like I said, I will, what I'm saying, just like before, when, just like before when I shut everything down effectively for 4 or 5 months, no, what I'm saying, going out to Smash, not what I'm saying, not hanging out with people, not even going to work, literally just staying at fucking home, and just going to the grocery store and shit, and then starting to ease up on that stuff as the months went on. And now that we have these options with all these vaccines and all the information that we know about it being studied, and the collaboration with other, studies and being done around the world from all these different communities, it's like, hey, I'm gonna go to where the science is saying we're going next, which is now it's time to start opening things back up within reason. And especially if you have a vaccine, that you are of less risk, you are at a lower risk than most people of making the situation worse while engaging in those same activities. So it's like, yeah, I'm gonna go in which way the science points, not just the shit that makes me feel comfortable, which is the exact type of criticisms that we make of people who are anti-vaxxers, or people who are flat earthers, or people who say we never went to the moon. You know what I'm saying? All that shit. So, I mean, the thing is, it is good to see that this shit is being called out, and that it's being recognized, and that it's being called out from people whom are of the same, that it's like cleaning house. The last thing we want is for more right wingers and conservatives to be able to latch onto this shit, and then all this liberals and lefties and progressives just stay quiet about it, don't bring it up, try to pretend it doesn't exist, and then it's used as a cudgel against us, as opposed to clearing house and being like, hey, y'all, instead of being like, hey, y'all are straying off the path, y'all need to come back over here, or you're gonna find yourself being alienated and shit. So. But don't let it be said that progressivism and left wing ideals and whatnot have not found a foothold in, have not, what I'm saying, developed a foothold in certain parts of the country. And that the influence is being felt, and that there's just as much cult like, you can find plenty of examples of cult like brainwashing behavior from left wingers and progressives, even while they may be better on certain issues. This will be the last one. Consider the experience of Somerville, Massachusetts, the kind of community where residents proudly display rainbow yard signs declaring, "In this house, we believe science is real." In the 2016 Democratic primary, 57% of voters there supported Bernie Sanders. And this year, the Democratic Socialists of America have a shot at taking over the city council. That's really great news. They took over the one in Arizona recently. As towns around one of them in some town in Arizona, as towns around Somerville began going back to in-person school in the fall, Mayor Joseph Curtatone and other Somerville leaders delayed a return to in-person learning. A group of moms, it's always some fucking moms, including scientists, pediatricians, and doctors treating COVID-19 patients, began to feel frustrated that Somerville schools weren't welcoming back students. Okay, I thought that was actually about to go in a different direction. I thought it was going to be like all like the yoga mom. I thought it was going to be like all like the yoga moms, the health moms, the ones who probably worship Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. And stuffing jade eggs in their vaginas. I thought it was gonna go in that direction. The fucking healing circle and dream catcher, type bitches. But no, but they were talking about actual like, doctors and shit. They consider themselves progressives and believe that they understood teachers' worries about getting sick, but they saw the city's proposed safety measures as nonsensical and unscientific, a sort of hygiene theater that prioritized the appearance of protection over getting kids back to their classrooms, which is very similar to the shit that we saw with 9/11. And the thing is, 9/11 sticks in the mind so much because I had only gotten on a plane after 9/11 had happened, and a lot of people were recollecting on how just less than a year later that they didn't have to go through all this, saying all these procedures and taking off their shoes and shit in order to get on a plane. And I was never going to be able to experience that, and still haven't over 20, years later, almost 20 years later. With Somerville kids still at home, contractors conducted in-depth assessments of the city schools buildings, leading the proposals that included extensive HVAC system overhauls and the installation of UV sterilized units and even automatic toilet flushers. Those sound like great things to do in any way. Renovations with a proposed budget of $7.5 million. All right. The mayor told me that supply chain delays and protracted negotiations with the local teachers union slowed the reopening process. Quote, no one wanted to get kids back to school more than me. It's people needing to feel safe, quote, he said. We need to make sure we're eliminating any risk of transmission from person to person in schools and carrying that risk over to the community. Well, listen, here's the thing. There's no such thing as 100% transmission or, no transmission, especially when you have the fact that I don't know if there's any COVID vaccines available for children, anybody under the age of 18. And then, of course, you have the fact that so many parents are abstaining from the shit. Now, that doesn't mean that, like, of course, saying just, tear the doors down, get things, how they were exactly a year and a half earlier. But again, as the evidence changes, just like as things have evolved during this crisis, now that we're a year and a half in it with all this information, where is it point? If it's pointing in the new direction, you got to go in the new direction. This isn't a matter of scientists trying to, manipulate shit or trying to get one over on us or, so we're not. You have this, you have a situation where people who have this very intimate and very specific understanding of this information still have their own personal preferences, which is why there is kind of a good point to be made about like glorifying and making celebrities out of public health officials, because they should be about sharing the information. There should be no reason that Dr. Fauci is not repeating the same shit that the CDC is saying. Same thing for Gavin Newsom. That's a problem, because that creates distrust even amongst, saying people who shouldn't, have any sense of distrust with one another on this issue. I spent 4 years. Oh, yeah. Here's the best part. Months slipped by and evidence mounted that schools could reopen safely. In Somerville, a local leader appeared to describe parents who'd wanted a faster return to in-person instruction as fucking white parents in a virtual public meeting. A community member accused the group of mothers for advocating for schools to reopen of being motivated by white supremacy. Quote, I spent 4 years fighting Trump because he was so anti science, quote Danielle Latagny, a Somerville mom and engineering professor who works to promote equitable access to clean water and sanitation during disease outbreaks, told me. I spent the last year fighting people who I normally would agree with, desperately trying to inject science into school reopening and completely failed. Jesus. And then again, that weaponization of like fucking white parents, and that somehow that this is motivated by white supremacy. I don't know anything about this district. I don't know anything about the people, any of the people, their ethnicities and whatnot here. And I actually think that it's good that it's not even being brought up to this point, because those things should not be used as weapons. And you know, man, I don't want to keep repeating myself, but yeah, this really shows that there are some issues amongst the left, amongst progressives and whatnot, and that in places where they do have influence, it is there's some people who have been so radicalized and pushed over the edge that they feel that now that just out of pure spite and pettiness, they have to stand against anybody who is not agreeing with their exact position, which is just to, at this point, not even follow the science, but to act as, act as gatekeepers effectively in, saying, and what type of behaviors you can do in this time of crisis. And that's not good. And then the weaponization of identity politics and used in this very superficial way, it's just as bad as when you hear somebody, saying somebody who's a piece of shit and they are defending themselves, or somebody else is being defended, saying behind their identity. And there's so many cases of that, somebody using their identity as a weapon against others, saying you're white, this is white supremacy and shit like that. And then saying that, well, you can't criticize me. You can't say that about me because I'm this identity. So you can't even say certain things. You can't even criticize me. It's complete bullshit.